there was a revise on the Narcotics Act, late 2018 in Korea, that
Mm,
allowed select imports of medical products,
mm,
CBD, I mean FDA, EMA approved products only, but it was a start. It was a revision to the strict law. And I saw the potential that this could go on forward. Then I was looking into the foreign market. I thought I saw it was booming. So, well, I could start with few associates I know that could really drive because there was nobody. There were foreign companies that were knocking on Korean local law firms to
mm.
evaluate whether it is legally possible to do anything in the Korean market. That was back in 2019, early 2019, but still their evaluation was not possible yet. That is still true. It is impossible to import like finished consumer goods based on CBD in Korea. But yeah, but this special economic zone in Andong is a big acceleration, if there is any, in
Mm.
Korea. And I'm still working with other startups regarding blockchain. But right now, I'm more focusing on backing up with the compliance and like for exportations and GMP thresholds to export, what cultivars or strains are allowed in the EU or Canada, and all
Mm.
sorts of like that. So I've been just hoarding up information that is happening outside to and just bring it down to just for the necessary information to the local regulators in Andong and the central government too. Because right now nobody knows, not even the regulators or the companies, maybe a few professors that are in those companies, but not in general. So we have the task to educate the general public and also the regulators and the whole market. And it's the same thing for blockchain too. New regulations, new law, new compliances. So yeah, I think I get the joy in that, seeing progression that has been existent before.
Yeah, okay. There's I got a lot of questions, and it's kind of like we've already started the show and we haven't even, gone live yet, which is
Yeah.
good. But I mean, are you what if you don't mind me asking, what was the medical condition that you were being treated for that that's kind of sparked your interest around CBD? And did you try any CBD and find any relief?
Not exactly because I shouldn't say I try CBD right now because it
No,
will
if you
be me trying narcotics. So
yeah, yeah. No, but I meant like overseas. You were overseas in America, or was your
and UK.
yeah? So you were CBD's illegal. It's legal in for consumption. So I was just curious to ask if you had tried it
Ah,
overseas
yeah,
and
yeah.
any type of experiences
It's
there. But yeah, what
no personal experience. Yeah.
so you've seen that, and what was the condition?
Yeah. Panic attacks since I was young, very young. Mostly when I take public transportation and under stress environments like tests, especially tests, because the Korean culture is a very high stress culture. Everybody seems to know, and especially with the college exams in Korea, especially with that. So the same old thing with panic attacks, not being able to stay in public or like being able to breathe from the
Mm,
start. So I thought that was just me. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. You thought, and then you realized it wasn't.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. CBD would help regulate um, the nervous system and various parts of the brain,
Mhm.
and the amount of the neuro transmissions that are going between various parts of the brains. And yeah, from my understanding, it diminishes fear responses. And it's well documented that CBD in high doses will support people that are affected by anxiety or any type of stress. Like there's public speaking
Mhm.
studies that have been conducted, and in Japan there was a group of, I think it was like 18 to 20 teenagers um, that had anxiety and depression and mood disorders, and they were trialed CBD between, I think, like 60 to 200 milligrams a day for a couple of weeks. And yeah, very,
Mhm.
very good improvements on any type of mood related symptoms. So
Mhm.
it's quite well documented, the use of CBD for mood disorders.
Yes,
I
definitely.
think it has a large part to do with the regulation of the nervous system. Because when you're out of when you're stressed, it can lead to a cascade of physiological responses that just
Yeah, very
can
true.
floor a person, can freeze them, or
Mhm.
stop affect breathing. So yeah, thanks for sharing that. I appreciate it. I've used CBD when I've been in countries where it's been available, and that's been a really interesting experience.
Mhm.
That's also interesting. I worked on a CBD medicine in the past, in a previous role that I was working. So it's like quite fascinating when you start to see the potential that this one molecule, there are plenty of other
Yeah.
molecules, but this one in particular seems to have so many effects. It makes you kind of wonder, like, what else can this plant do? There's like
Mhm.
700 compounds in the plant. So
Yeah, there's still plenty to explore. Yeah, always excited to see new papers done, published abroad, exploring like CBG, CBNs, and whatever comes next and their effects. So I think it's a new threshold for everybody. It's a new door, new industry open for every country, but for humankind in general.
yeah, yeah, it's pretty cool. Only just the beginning, really.
Yeah. We only know like three or four, and those not even that accurate still. We're still exploring CBD. So yeah, I'm very excited.
Yeah, it's literally a researcher's dream come true. Got so much variety, so
Yeah.
much opportunity. I wonder, are there many, is there many, as many passionate cannabis advocates in South Korea as like yourself?
I'll say a handful officially, and yeah, and few more under the radar that is scared to acknowledge that they're interested in cannabis,
Yeah.
because there's a very big social stigma regarding cannabis, and a lot of like Korean pop stars, like K-pop stars, has been arrested and been jailed because of the possession or usage of cannabis in Korea still, and it's very
Mm.
frowned upon on the media. So it's a very big no-no even just to discuss it. But recently, after this Andong special province got approved,
Mm.
um, seeing the reactions on the internet, what people see on the news, mostly the younger generation, I suspect, but they are very optimistic and they're very open towards, and
Mm.
some people were very knowledgeable already. So I guess they are have personal experience abroad or personally interested, but I was surprised of the openness of the younger generation towards cannabis. So yeah, it will take time, like every other country did, but I think Korea is always a fast follow up, not always the first up, but it's
Mm.
always a fast follower in every industry. So I think this will be no problem for Korea to understand.
A polar opposite, I believe, to Japan. Even though they've got CBD, I don't think there's much sentiment between I read this recently, as younger generations in Japan don't necessarily. Cannabis is frowned upon as well, even as a medicine. I believe it's the same sentiment in Singapore as well, where they are. Again, it's this, Japan, CBD available, medical cannabis still pretty much an ongoing development, and it's only just started picking up pace with various advocacy groups that are now looking at
Hmm.
conducting studies with specific products, but they're only at the beginning of their discussion.
Yes.
And then you've got Singapore with they've had trials under development since about late 2018, early 2019. Singapore had announced a number of different trials, and I believe one patient in Singapore has been granted access to use CBD for epilepsy, but it's still just
Mhm.
it's still far away. At least in South Korea, there's at least a movement in the direction to allow for imported products that are registered. So there's an
Mhm.
understanding. But you'd mentioned that there's a number of youth that's interested. How many are there many doctors that have come out in South Korea in support of cannabis?
Oh, it started with the doctors group. Especially we had this seminar. I think it was last year, like October. It was
Mm.
at Korean University at the medical campus, and it was sponsored by the university doctors, especially with an regarding to the opioid crisis and all
Mm.
those drug what do you call it, anesthesia used in hospitals right now. So they have been discussing to be the CBD products to be the substitute for opioid anesthesia in
Mm.
hospitals. So it started with professional doctors because the law only allowed for medically labeled product as import in Korea, including elixinol and
Mm.
nabalones, and I forgot the other two. But it started with anesthesia and um, medicines. So
Mm.
definitely started with doctors, and starting down from the doctors is going down. But I think there is a polar opposite between the very few hippie generations in very young like musicians generally, those culture that is advocacies of marijuana cannabis products in Korea, and the polar opposite, the regulators and the doctors right now. So we have to find a way through to meet in the middle. And the funny thing is, this number was correct last year, so I'm not sure if it's correct still. But most of the prescription of elixinol happened in Korea after that it was allowed to be imported to Korea.
You
So
mean?
it's
Do you
like
mean?
global.
Sorry. Do you mean Epidiolex?
Epidiolex, yes, yes. Yeah, that was a number I heard because mostly the adult use legal cannabis products is a growing and a far bigger market for medical cannabis products now. But since it's only allowed for medical products in Korea, most of the subscriptions for the substitute of anesthesia and Epidiolex is happening in Korea right now.
Mm. Yeah, interesting. Yeah, there's Marinol, there's Epidiolex, there's Sativax, Dronabinol.
Lebanon.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. So those are the only products that I'm aware of. But do you see the South Koreans changing the framework to like similar to Germany or New Zealand or Denmark, where there's like Denmark's got a regime where it's can only be exported to Denmark if it's a product that's being used for patients in the origin country.
Okay.
Do you
Hmm.
see the South Korean government or the Ministry of Health making amendments to the regulations to allow for a greater pool of medicines that are GMP certified and pharmaceutically validated for import into South Korea?
As long as it is gone to the scrutiny of the level of the EU FTA EMA level, it's no problem to import them under current law. But the other condition is that there shouldn't be other medicine available in Korea for the same symptom. So
Mm.
if there is a other medicine that is already imported in Korea that is treatable for the same symptom, they can't import the said medicine abroad. So that is the current condition right now. But the patient groups, advocacy groups, and the meaning of this Andong province, Andong special regulation free zone is to broaden up that criteria. But
Mm.
yeah, currently only for those conditions.
Yeah, so let's start at where are you today? Because you're not at home, you're in a hotel room. Where are you right
Yeah.
now? What's going on?
Sorry, are we starting the interview now?
Oh, we've been back and forwarding already for a while now. It's just another
Oh, okay,
continuation.
okay. All right. So yeah, I'm in Andong right now. It's officially speaking, the event is the Andong Industrial Hemp Special Economic Free Zone. That's a long name,
Mm.
and it's the first ever zone province that is enabling for the cultivation of hemp just for the CBD.
Mm.
So traditionally, it was only for the fiber and the textiles, and it has been cultivated all across Korea. And like I said before, just earlier, the strain that is used in Korea for those textiles the name is Cheongsam. But the CBD percentage of that strain was only around 1 or 2% or even lower, and no THC, not like calculable THC. So the current goal of the Andong Special Regulation Free Zone is starting from cultivation and cultivating those local Cheongsam strain and also other reachable strains that they can import and higher up their CBD level and go through extraction, distillations, and the big goal is to get a certain amount of CBD isolates and to export those CBD isolates or develop medical use cannabis products in Korea. But still, it's only for exportation and R&D, and it's strictly under the framework of the smart farms. So it has to be cultivated, distilled within a very strict lab environment because it's still narcotics in Korea. And it has to go through the same scrutiny level of dealing with narcotics, which is you have to sign everyone who gives someone the batch and all the milligrams and all that to the other, and everybody has to write their records accordingly. Which is the reason why I mentioned about blockchain, which will be the main technology to be keeping track of those products and cultivation and isolates.
And the government's open to using blockchain technologies.
Yes, going back to blockchain since 2019, the government has been trying to implement the blockchain technology in all areas of the central government, including from transportation, real estate, medical, and all that. But that, in my opinion, I think that was a try to negate all the hype about cryptocurrencies. It's still very, the current government is still very negative about usage of cryptocurrencies, because I know as a fact there's a lot of scams, like 97% of most of the most startup company or projects has been related or were scams. So I understand their viewpoint because they go all through the criminal activities. But so at the same time, they are still open to the usage of the technology itself. And at the same time, regarding Andong, they're trying to implement the technology to keep track records because of the immutability and transparency of the technology itself. Yes, so I think that pretty much wraps up what we're trying to do in Andong. And there are 22 companies right now. And I think I heard they were looking to get 22 more companies in Andong, including startups to really big pharmaceuticals and cosmetics companies. And so the companies are exploring from full spectrum CBD oils to CBD isolates. So they'll be trying out all those different equipments, different methods, like rhodolizations or using colloidal silver to get feminized seeds, and getting different feedbacks from distillation or chromatography. But well, we're still exploring with the local strains too, so we might get even different conclusions opposed to foreign strains, which is a cultivar allowed in Canada or EU. So I think it's a very interesting and a good starting point to ramp up any discussions about CBD and cannabis in Korea.
And what's actually happening in Andong today? What's this event?
Oh, so today is the actual, like, the ribbon cutting event in Korea. So they gathered up all the companies, and the Andong City Council personnel are explaining what they're trying to do, how they will support those companies. And the pilot program will be starting next year, so that the actual budget will be executed starting next year. And the whole budget is about $40 million US.
Okay, great.
During a 4-year period, and during those 4-year period, there's a first year cultivation R&D and second extraction, distillation, all that. You can expect that. And at the end, there will be exportations and evaluation of whether or not this project was successful or not. So I think it's a very similar way that happened in the US. It started with the 2014 Farm Bill with the pilot programs. And after the conclusion of the 2014 Farm Bill, it was started with 2018, the big revision that enabled the whole market.
Mm,
So the few enthusiasts that existed in Korea, even before anything regarding Andong happened, are still very frustrated by the fact that it's only very restricted to R&D and to exportations. But in my opinion, because I have past experiences with discussing with the government with new technologies and new markets and new regulations, this is a very, very good start, very promising start.
mm,
And even the special regulation free zone in Andong itself was seen very pessimistic to actually even get approved by the central government. So everybody thought it's not going to get through, and there was a lot of pessimistic discussions internally within the government around how could we even think about legalizing any cannabis R&D research and development in Korea, mostly because of the fact that, in my opinion, Korea is, if not one of the most, is a very Confucius country culturally.
mm,
And politically, no mayor or a senator or even a government worker would want their handprints on legalizing anything regarding narcotics in
mm.
Korea because they will be very quickly attacked by the opposing party or the other opposing advocacy groups, which I can't really state right now. So it's a very political and cultural thing to start legalizing anything narcotics. But it was a very eye-opener and a very surprising event that started in Andong right now. And even the people that really put in the application for this special economics were surprised that it got actually passed. So,
Mm.
mhm. So the first revision started in 2019, like I mentioned before, and this is the next step. And this is a 2 to 4 year project in Nandong. But what I expect is within that period, I think there's going to be a bigger revision legally up in a part to the UN rescheduling of CBD and what's happening in US, Canada, and UK. So there is a very high possibility that even during this pilot program, revisions can be made to the system, the legal system, and there is a possibility for a new market to be open, internal market to be open in Korea.
Yeah,
So that
well,
will be, that will be within like 2024, 2023, yeah, somewhere around that.
it's exciting. I'm curious to know what the evaluation criteria for moving the program from phase, you'd say 2 now to phase 3, or part A to part B, part B to part C. So what's the evaluation criteria for this to take the next step forward? Because you mentioned that they're going to have an evaluation criteria, like an evaluation period.
Mhm.
What are they trying to evaluate? What's the criteria look like?
I can't really expose the actual numbers, but regarding cultivation and extraction, they have a threshold of is this special andong? Is it possible to cultivate and extract a certain number of CBD isolates within a period with this budget? And that will be just for the evaluation criteria for the pilot program itself, because they have central government and local government funding.
Mm,
So, and at the same time, they will be evaluating were there any security risks in the process, and if there are any like unlabeled exposure of cannabis products that has been coming from the Andong project, that will be a big, big minus for the
mm,
project itself. And it goes through all those processes. Have they been compliant to the current structure? Have they been able to reach the level of CBD isolate, or were they able to make a successful consumer good or medical product that could be exported? Have they been compliant to the foreign regulations regarding pesticides or cultivar strains, or even would it be FDA proven abroad for as being a topical or edibles? So any imaginable criteria will be seen in the plans. of
Yeah,
Andong.
wow. I mean, there's so many, and there's different. So that they're going to allow for pharmaceuticals and consumer goods. So topicals and cosmetics, pharmaceuticals. Is there going to be any types of? Is this strictly medical and CBD based, or are there going to be tests around, the industrial use of the crop, or is it strictly CBD?
Strictly, the goal for the Andong city themselves were for CBD isolates for
Okay,
medical use, but
and
still the individual companies, sorry about that, individual companies in Andong are eager to try edibles and topicals too.
okay, so it's not just medical; it's CBD as a base ingredient
Mhm.
to understand what
Yes.
that is. So that's going to be interesting because you've got a lot of different variables of what. Yeah, so talk to me about this growing process. So they've got the greenhouses built already, and how much are you able to speak roughly around what they're anticipating the annual volume of material to be grown? Like how much cannabis are they actually expecting to grow over a year period?
Well, I think nobody knows right now. It is in the blueprint, but the actual smart farm itself is still being built, and the actual equipment for cultivation or extraction hasn't come in yet, hasn't been built or hasn't been imported yet. So I can't really say. But from the broad picture, there has been a certain level they have to meet before they get the first year evaluation for the cultivation and extraction. But I don't think it's that public yet. This is
Yeah.
still an internal discussion.
Yeah, I wonder what the because I wonder if they're going to allow for export of CBD
Isolates.
only for pharmaceutical use.
Yeah.
Because and I wonder what the price, because the pricing market changes quite frequent. It's a fluctuation. It's a commodity,
Mhm.
and there will be price breaks over the coming year. So I wonder if they're anticipating a certain amount of revenue or financial gain from selling this isolate overseas, and if they have factored in the costs around what CBD is today versus what it's going to be in the future, and if there's other cannabinoids or opportunities that are worth exploiting for additional revenue value. I mean, do you have any thoughts on that? Because I mean, you know the cannabis industry internationally. Have you considered this?
Um, I think revenue won't be the first problem that this project will be meeting right now. I think they have just feeling out the possibilities on the know-how because most of the people that is in Andong right now, it'll be the first to actually deal with these equipments. They have been using those similar equipments for other use, for other medicals or topicals, cosmetics in Korea, but it will be a first for them. So I think it would be a net investment
Mm.
for research and development in Korea for that period. And even if they were to export it, they won't be able to match the global market price from my understanding of market economy right now, because the whole farm itself will be very restricted in size because they have to be overgoing to the high level of security process. So at the same time, if they were to meet the market price, have to be highly subsidized by the government. But
Mm.
still, that would be they will get a certain amount of data in that process. And what was the second question?
The second question was if they had factored in the
Uh,
amount of return that would come in financially for what they're going to be producing. If that's a factor in their thinking right now. You said it's purely R&D based. So they're not, one of the
mhm.
assessment criteria is not how much income is this going to generate,
Yeah,
how
yeah.
much money this is, but that's what I would imagine. They're looking at this as an economic boost. So they
Mhm.
need to make it financially viable to ensure that there's a local economy that can be generated, which I'm sure it can be if they're allowing for these
Yes.
products to be distributed. I guess that's the game plan. More around
Mhm.
what this could be for the local markets as opposed to the internationals. I'm sure that's an element, but there's a greater element of value if it's locally made, locally produced, and locally distributed.
Yes. So after this pilot program, I expect a lot to be distributed along local farmers. I hope it would go for just field cultivation to actually meet the market price standards right now. And after that, seeing that already there's a FMB company interested in this Andong, and their proposal was strictly on to developing infusing CBD in food and beverage products in Korea. So right now, I will stick to my previous statement that I think will be net investment, strictly R&D purposes, but they will still look at the numbers and say have to show to the government that and this economy of size, it will be possible, viable for Korea to be exporting. But still, you have to consider that over 70% of South Korea are mountains, and there are very restricted amount of farmlands. And even if the field cultivation of hemp is allowed, it will be mostly for local use for fiber textiles or very limited amount of cultivation. So either they will be looking at the smart farms to boost the output per square feet for industrial hemp, and because they have very restricted area for cultivation, they'll be looking for higher yield industries like in R&D for medical use, and it'll be much harder for them to tackle the just adult legal use of cannabis products.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. That would be an ideal outcome, having it available like in the UK and having local products available, like the opportunity for locals to capitalize on, not necessarily relying on an import market. So back to the event and what's going on in Andong. So it's basically a trial over the next few years for the government to assess, the federal government to assess, one, what it does to the local economy, but two, the great CBD will look like in South Korea across the country. Is that a correct understanding?
Sorry, I lost you for about 15 to 20 seconds.
Okay, so the trial that's running in Andong is to assess what the impact of the local economy are for Andong, to understand what the implications of CBD for South Korea across the country would look like. Is that a fair understanding, or have I missed something?
Sorry, I think the connection was. I'm back right now, but could you repeat the question again? Sorry about that.
Yeah, so in Andong, the government's using this as a trial to understand the implications of cannabis or hemp on the local economy, and general learnings from CBD into different products. And then over the next 4 years, that assessment will lead to a greater potential legalization of CBD across the country. And they are in all of these businesses to work on different R&D projects to assess various parts of the supply chain and product development of CBD.
Yes, I think that's a very true statement, and I agree on most of the part. Yes, and coming back to the thinking of it, you'll see all the medical and the cosmetic companies in Korea, including the actual production made in Korea. But from my understanding, most of the production is not made for those cosmetics and pharmaceuticals in Korea. Some may be in some factory, but most of them are importing the actual ingredients for those cosmetics and pharmaceuticals. And there are number one, number two OEM manufacturing companies in Korea for cosmetics and pharmaceuticals. And bringing that to consideration, after all this R&D, there will be, as I said, limited amount of production available for industrial hemp in Korea. But at the same time, after those R&D, after those companies get the information on the actual numbers of CBD, dealing with CBD, making the CBD products, there will be higher possibility that they will be manufacturing either locally or abroad using ingredients that they have been importing abroad with a lower cost. But they still will have an upper hand in the knowledge of making good products, good cosmetic products, as we may see in the cosmetics market globally these days. regarding K-pop culture and K-cosmetics and all that. So even though it won't be economically viable to do mass production, mass cultivation in Korea, it'll still be viable to get the regulators to be educated through this pilot program and say, well, I think it would be okay for Korean companies to openly mass produce cannabis-based products in Korea.
So what does the program allow like for you and companies to do? Can you walk us through what the actual program entails from so they can grow cannabis, but what type of cannabis, what are they extracting? Can you break down what this actually entails?
Mm-hmm. So the actual the project personnel understand there are a lot of cannabinoids, like up to the 700 in the industrial hemp, but now it's only strictly for CBD right now. They are not looking into CBG or CBN or that. And each companies are designated or they put an application for strictly either cultivation, extraction or distillation, and making consumer goods and exportation. Other than security, which is going through the whole process. So each company will be using their specifically built equipment for extraction or their method of smart farms which be fine-tuned for developing industrial hemp. And those are those very micro diversified companies within the Andong area. So one company will be just R&D for FMDs, and other company will be just providing their facilities for the smart farms. But all of those will be just for CBDs.
Yeah, okay. With the companies that are developing, is there much international buy-in? Is this all done by locals, or what kind of appetite has there been for international groups looking in and taking advantage of this project?
As far as I know, there hasn't been any foreign companies that are really allowed to be participating in this project. It's not legally banned, but it's still possible. But you have to have a branch or the headquarter of a company within the designated area within Andong to participate, and there has to be a certain number above personnel that be working within Andong. And the second thing is, it's legally possible if those companies meet that criteria and they are willing to invest in the local economy. But at the same time, that was a big downside because of the COVID-19. So there were companies that are interested to invest or either actually come to Andong for this pilot program, but it was mostly turned down because of the COVID crisis. And even this event right now has been bumped a month. It was originally planned like mid-September, but it's bumped down to today and tomorrow. So that's why I'm doing this interview in Andong right now. Yeah, still, if there are any companies that are actually interested in coming to Andong and actually want to experience Korea and what they do, there are still open slots for this company to come in to. And I think the most part, the role of those companies won't be to actually do the R&D, but to partner up with the local companies and just let's say like technological investments or those partnerships in Korea and have a head start with the actual consumer goods development in Korea regarding cannabis.
That's an interesting proposition. It's just, the COVID situation really puts a stint in those plans, because the reality is, I mean, for most parts of the world, there's no travel internationally into South Korea, is there?
It is possible, but you have to be get isolated for 2 weeks. But you're going to be isolated in a very nice hotel, so that would be that much of a problem if you're okay with staying in a hotel for 2 weeks.
2 weeks, jeez.
Yeah,
not a comfortable idea. No, not that. It's that's really disappointing. But so how many people have turned out today? What's the kind of the turnout for the event? Is it several hundred people? Is it just a small room? What does it look like?
Right now we're using the hotel ballroom, but unfortunately, because of the COVID level situation, it is only restricted to under 50 people. So originally, it was planned as like a big seminar to get the local farmers to look into and learn about the pilot program. But unfortunately, it's only down to under 50 people. And so mostly it is professors, doctors, or the corporate people, the actual POCs of those individual company that is looking into. And in those individual sessions of the Andong city personnel explaining what would be happening in the future, how you should using the budget and what R&D you should be doing. But before that, all the individual companies put in their application, so they know what they can do. But I think there's a big disparity between those individual companies regarding the knowledge about cannabis. Well, maybe some companies only know about cultivation of other vegetables or smart farms, but they don't know about cannabis. So it would be a very big learning process for them too.
That will be a steep learning process. I'm sure there'd be a lot of opportunity for groups that have that knowledge to collaborate with the local companies, because there's growing a crop, growing tomatoes is different to growing cannabis. Yeah, that's interesting. And have these companies gone out? What was the tender process like? Did these companies have to, like, what's the type of background of is the government expecting? Because I mean, you guys at Collective C have got experience in cannabis, but what about the other companies that are not necessarily cannabis companies? What's the criteria that the government used to accept the participants that are now in this program?
Oh, that is pretty much straightforward. Any local provinces that is putting in the application of a new pilot program of just like special economic zones or special regulation free zones, the actual city council, the provincial council, put in the application to the central government that they will be doing this and such. And before putting in that application, they just spread out these application sheets to individual companies that is potentially will be interested in doing this. And also they put out news articles that this province will be trying to put in an application for this special economic zone to the central government. And through that process, many companies will be putting an application to the local government, and the local government will screen out their applications. So they will read out like absurd. They will be testing with THC and all that. That will be read it out, but the local government will be the first filter for those applications, and they have to make the whole package of this province will be trying this economic zone. We already have these companies that will be willing to participate if the special economic zone were to be passed. And that application goes through the central government, specifically the Ministry of SMEs, smaller businesses, a ministry for smaller businesses, and they will evaluate the validity of that through discussing with the local regulator, which in Korea will be MFDS, which is previously was Korean FDA, but the current name is MFDS. So the Ministry of SMEs discuss the viability with other professors or other think tank or the expert groups, including MFDS. And it goes through several process of evaluation and discussion within the central government. They will invite local personnel, local farmers, the consortium companies to that discussion. And it goes for like 4 or 5 months, just the discussion itself. And finally, it gets approved. And the condition for those companies.
It's been approved.
Yes, it's been approved, and they will be executing the budget from next year. But it won't be a net investment from the government, just the government to the private companies. So it's a fund matching. So maybe 7-3 or 6-4 ratio of the fund budget. So the individual companies or consortium companies has to make an investment too, but they will still receive funding from the local government and the central government.
That was 40 million that the government's invested, right?
Yes, for the whole project.
And that's over 4 years.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. What do you think the government's going to try implement any type of regulations in this or regulation-free zone around the accessibility of the CBD product for patients?
During anything happening within the process within Andong right now, it won't be accessible for certain consumers or patient groups right now because it's not an end product. It's just the whole process. So they won't be developing well, from my knowledge right now, they won't be making a product for local use. And if there is a patient that was looking into using cannabis-derived medical products, they still have to go through those 4 products that we mentioned before that is legally possible to import into Korea. That still remains the same, but it will be different after this pilot program. But during the pilot program, I don't see individual taking advantage individually in the individual level within Andong.
Yeah, that's a shame. Yeah, they've only got the access to the registered medicines.
Yeah.
Has there been much uptake in Sativex and Epidiolex in South Korea? Are there many doctors prescribing these products?
Certain universities, Southern University doctors has been prescribing Epidiolex, but it's not like a normal prescription procedure that we would see in a hospital. So if the doctor sees that a certain their patient has to use that medicine, they have to call up to I'm not sure of the official English name, but it's a special purpose pharmacy that is center that is run by the government, that is third party of the government. So they have to call up to that center, and that center will put in an order abroad. So even the patient will have to wait for at least a month or 2 to receive that medication because they can't legally stack it up in the storage for these products. So it's a order-based prescription.
That's such a strict system.
Yeah.
It's so archaic, but makes sense. I mean, it is what it is. But yeah, I wonder if the government will lean. I mean, has any of this trial in Andong been? How much of it's been encouraged by local proponents, and how much of it's been something that the government's looked at and seen overseas working and have decided to implement themselves? Does it really just come from people like yourselves? Has there been any people in government that's pushed for a program like this to be implemented based on overseas examples?
So I might get some negative feedback from the regulators for saying this, but mostly, like I said before, the regulators or politicians, local or central, won't be willing to get their footprints on this process. But maybe except for the Andong local politicians, but they didn't want to, and they saw it was too risky to actually go through a pilot program right now. And even though things happen abroad, that doesn't mean it has to happen in Korea. So even if the rescheduling happens in the UN, based on international law, well, we have the obligation to pass it through the local house, but it doesn't mention about when. So it can take 1 year or 2 years to actually reschedule it in Korea too. But so I won't say there has been much backing up from the regulator side of the government. But speaking about Ministry of SME, they have their obligation to ramp out new markets and new possibilities in Korea. So from my view, there was a conflict between the regulators and the Ministry of SME regarding economics and business. And the Ministry of SME has helped a lot, helped Andong and the consulting companies and other advocacy groups in the process of proving this special regulation-free zone.
I wonder what the first day. I mean, how long have you been involved in this Andong development, and how many years has it taken to push this idea through to where it is today, which is kind of the still very early, but it's the beginning. It's starting today, really. So how long has this been in the works for?
So it's the starting of the actual discussion. I'm not sure, but I think it was around April, May this year. So that is when the central government takes in applications for new special economic zones or regulation-free zones. So there were actually two provinces that put in their applications for cannabis and CBD, and the other province, I think it was Chuncheon in the Gangwon province. This is a Chuncheon city within the Gangwon province, but they have been weighing in between Andong and Chuncheon. I think Chuncheon was more weighed towards smart farms, and the cannabis was one of those components of the smart farm, and Andong was more open of discussing the name of CBD. But Chuncheon unfortunately got dropped down. But I see they still have an opportunity to, as a secondary a special regulation free zone for cannabis. But right now it's only for Andong. And the process for Andong and Gyeongsangbuk-do province, which is the province that Andong City is located at, they putting out news articles about this since April, May. But internally, what I heard was that they have been trying to push this through since the revision of the Narcotics Act, which is late 2018. So the local regulators or whoever was in charge at that time was studying the CBD market since late 2018 at least.
Okay. Wow. So with the implementation of the medical program, it still hasn't. How many patients are actually accessing cannabis roughly? I mean, it was introduced in 2018, but it's still a highly restricted system.
Mm-hmm.
So are there many patients that are speaking out about their cannabis stories and their use of cannabis, and is that leaning any favor towards more access to patients?
Definitely. So early on, we've been closely working with a patient advocacy group for legalizing medical cannabis in Korea. So it was pioneered by Reverend Kang. Reverend Kang Song-seok, and he was a main stimulant that actually passed the revision back in 2018. So he actually put in the draft for the revision at that time to I forgot the word in English, but in the National House, to put it up as an agenda. And even for their surprise, it got passed, and so the Narcotics Act got revisions. And ever since then, the patient groups have been raising their voices. They have been visiting the Blue House, which is the White House in Korea, where the president resides. And there have been a lot of open discussions since then in the National Assembly or individual local hospitals. And ever since then, more and more patients has been getting medicated using this product, even though it's very hard to get those products. And still, there are patients that are overlooked because, like I discussed, they have to have a certain specific condition that is untreatable with local medicine that is available in Korea. So those patients, including like me, getting panic attacks. So I still take Xanax. And other patients that have a sleep disorder or anything related to the nervous system that it can be potentially treated by medicine, cannabis-based medicine, or even cannabis-based health supplements, but they won't still be legally able to get those. So I think there are a larger, very big patient group that is neglected by the current system, but the number is going up, definitely.
Would you have an idea of what you think the number would be?
The number?
Yeah, do you have a rough idea of the number?
I couldn't say exactly. It won't be.
Would it be in the hundreds or thousands?
I assume it's still in the hundreds for now.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And are the medicines very expensive? Are they subsidized in any way?
From my knowledge, there is no health insurance for those medicines yet. For a medicine to get a subsidy from the government is very similar to the UK, like the NHS. So it has to be registered in a local legal system, and it has to be seen that the import price and the subsidy price, if it matches with the national health security program. And unfortunately, those cannabis-derived medicines are not registered in that system yet. So still, the patients has to pay it out of their own pockets, the whole importation price.
Wow. Do you know what that is roughly?
To be honest, I'm not really sure about the price right now, but it was at least the hundreds of dollars per vial.
Yeah, wow. That's
Yeah.
insane. It can be so expensive. Especially if you're prescribed a THC and a CBD product, you know, $300 to $400 Australian dollars. It's not cheap. It's very expensive. Yeah. So I guess with the Andong project, what do you see as the biggest opportunity that's available right now in this project? And for what part of the supply chain? Is there anywhere that you're particularly excited about?
So I could go on with the specifics, or any specific consortium or being cultivation or extraction, but from my point of view, I think the success of the pilot program in the US, Farm Bill 2014, and seeing that traditionally US hasn't been a hemp cultivator like China or Switzerland or Korea, because mostly those countries have been cultivating for textiles. But US hasn't been that kind of country, but has been successful with going through 2018 Farm Bill and the new law bill, the partisan bill, early January 2020, was only through the backup from the general public. I think that was the only force that made that boost possible, starting from California. So other than the internal R&D development within Andong province, I think it would be more of a marketing and educational prospect of this pilot program. The Andong City has to pump out new news articles or documentaries or exclusive coverage in the general media, and I think that would be a bigger advantage for the market as a whole in Korea.
I really hope so.
Really I cool to see. It's already coming out. Already those discussions between youth and the general public on the internet is already pumping up. So there hasn't been any other than those illegal marijuana consumptions in Korea that has been going through the like a deep webs and all that in Korea. But now there are new healthy discussions on the web in Korea, discussion, because most of even the youth think, isn't marijuana still a drug in the U.S. abroad too? Isn't it harmful for health? So don't you get hallucinated consuming marijuana and all that? It's still on that level in Korea. So because of those news articles coming out from Andong and Gyeonggi City right now, there are already discussions going out. So I think it's a very, very big plus, not just bringing revenue to those companies R&Ding in Andong, but to the general public, and the regulators will feel very alleviated of their stress, because passing through a new revision through a regulation without any consensus made in the general public is a very big, is not really possible in Korea, like culturally, with the public workers and regulators. But if the general public can be educated through this program naturally, it will be a natural process for the regulators, and even they will get educated seeing those media outlets. I think it's a very good plus.
So you said before that it's very stigmatized in South Korea. Younger generations are not as accepting of the old norm or the previous way of seeing it. What about yourself? How do you see cannabis?
I started knowing about cannabis with learning the history of the regulation of cannabis in the U.S. Why it was used before the big regulations in the 40s, 50s in the U.S., and why it was criminalized and all that. And seeing the health beneficial, the benefit to the health for me, my nervous is not just panic attacks. I've, like you just mentioned before, if you have a problem in your nervous system, you're gonna have all those different outcomes regarding to that, other than just having trouble breathing. So for now, for me, I don't really see those stigmas for my generation. I can't really generalize it, but I think our generation is very much free with those social stigmas regarding cannabis, and we have the ability, even though we understand there's a social stigma on narcotics and could be very harmful, but we have the ability to think rationally about these new opportunities, and it won't take that long as there's a certain level of consensus within the youth group in Korea for the new market to be open. So I don't think that would be that hard in Korea, as long as the Korean people fond of IT technology, fond of internet, are very fast learners, as long as I know. So as long as it's pumped in the general media and the internet, I don't think there's a big of a problem, and I don't really think criminalizing CBD cannabis won't be beneficial to Korea in the long run.
Good answer. And you said before that you were concerned about the timing. We started at speaking at 6:55. It's an hour now, so I think it's a good way to close it. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. Good luck. And I mean, you guys at the Collective C, you're working on you're acting as an advocacy and advisory group. So you guys are some of the most knowledgeable people in the space, the cannabis space in South Korea.
Yeah, regarding regulation in Korea, yes, yeah.
Cool. Well, I'll make a note of that and give a link to you guys, and I'll also promote it. But yeah, it's been a pleasure, mate. Thank you so much for your time.
Likewise. Thank you for your time.
My pleasure, Hong. You take care. All the best.
Yeah. Okay, all the best to you too.
Ciao,
Bye-bye.
ciao.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone. That was fun. See you guys again in about a week or so's time. Until then, take care.